Hello and welcome to GreenFleet Talks. My name is Kate Armitage and I'm your host for our discussion today. I'm delighted to be joined by Darren Gardner, who is Country Manager for UK and Ireland at Keba.
Hello.
Hi Darren. Good to see you again. Thank you for joining us.
Pleasure.
Darren, now Keba is one of the largest wallbox brands in Europe. Can you tell me what underpins your success?
Yeah, we are one of the largest wallbox brands in Europe, nearly manufactured 600,000 units globally, Austrian based. And what makes us different? Well, I guess from a global perspective, we believe we're the only carbon neutral AC charger on the planet. We hope we're wrong, but we believe that we're the only one so far. So we do that through, obviously our production is powered by renewable energy. We've gone to great lengths to recycle components, both through the charging points and into other products. And then, of course, we measure our emissions, scope 1, 2, and 3, and we've offset those. It's not perfect that we do that, but it's measurable and it's transparent to us and to our customers, and we can make steps to reduce that. So I think that's had such a huge amount of influence on our growth. And then the other main reason is our chargers work, and that we find that they're used in commercial use cases, typically fleets and destination charging, super reliable. And that's what you want as a fleet operator, is the certainty that the charger is going to work for a long time. So yeah, I think that's it. I could probably go on all day about that, but I won't.
Yeah, Darren. I mean, that's great. I mean, 600,000 charge points. That's a fantastic achievement. Almost 600. It's a fantastic achievement. And this whole idea that you have a carbon neutral product is becoming increasingly important for fleets, and there is this growing awareness about scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions. So great that you're at the head of the game. And yeah, let's hope, as you say, that more and more products will have that edge as well in the future.
Yeah.
So Darren, clearly you've got a lot of experience in this market. But for some of our fleets that have not already begun this process of electrification, what would you say the most important considerations when they're looking at the business case?
Yeah, so it's a confusing business case, an emotional business case, because people are so locked and wedded to petrol and diesel. And so getting people away from that mindset is a tricky one. So it's not just a business case that has to win the accountants over. It's a business case that has to win people over. So it's multifaceted. But with the accountants in mind, I guess I suppose the first things are to start with the vehicle themselves. What is the journey that the fleet is undertaking? The average trips, the payload, all of those sorts of things. I would recommend engaging with a company called Diode. There are others who will do lots of diagnostic work to help fleet operators understand, okay, you operate this type of vehicle now, a light commercial vehicle or a series of cars. If you transfer to electric, what type of vehicle is right for you? And they will do all of the diagnostic work, as a plug for you down at Diode. And then they will then, or companies like them, will then help a fleet operator decide what's the best vehicle for them. So that would be my first starting point. And of course, from there, you've got your total cost of ownership of the vehicle itself, the maintenance, the insurance, the fuel, the electricity. Now that's the next big thing, isn't it? Then what type of infrastructure does a fleet implement? Do you charge at home? So is it a back to home model? Do you charge on the go? Do you charge back at base? Or is it a combination of those things? And so once you've worked out what kind of vans or cars that you need and the average miles, you can then work out when is the best time to charge, the speed of charge, and then that drives the type of charger that you need. Do you need a super fast DC charger? Or actually, if you're a fleet that's mostly parked overnight, will a 7 kilowatt AC do? Because there's a huge cost difference, both in terms of the charger and the infrastructure associated with that. So that all drives the numbers. And essentially that then gives you your cost base. And then from there, you have to say, well, okay, how does that return on investment work? Now, that raises a number of questions then. Is your return based on the fuel savings and the total cost of ownership of the fleet? Or is it something that you can do with the infrastructure that you will charge for the use of those charging points? So that could be, we have one customer that delivers Teslas to dealerships. In that particular site, they're doing just a straightforward consumption report and an onward bill to their customer for the use of the charging. In some other use cases, the fleet operator wants to charge the staff for charging, and in some other use cases, they'll say, okay, this is a private network between 9 and 5. But after those hours, we want to open up the site for the local community. And so when considering the business case, you have to sort of consider all of these angles. Is there a revenue stream either from employees, customers, or the wider public that drives that sort of return on investment model? And then there are even more complicated things, which I won't bore people with now, but, drop me a line. If you've got a back-to-base fleet that is charging, and let's say they're all Nissan EMV20s, I think, figured me Nissan, the Nissan vans.
Yeah, EMV200.
EMV200s, thank you. If they're an EMV200 parked up at the peak hours of 4 p.m. to sort of 8 p.m., then there are things that a good energy manager will be able to participate in on what we call the ancillary markets that can attract revenues in as a fleet operator. So essentially, you've got a fleet parked up, which is a whole load of batteries that the National Grid and DNOs can make use of, and that can be a revenue stream in. So all of those things drive the business case from a financial point of view. But you've got to take hearts and minds with you.
Well, there's so much there. There is so much there. So I think at the end you were talking about vehicle to grid, which is great. Of course, if we're talking about a fleet that's only just thinking about this, I would suggest please don't start with vehicle to grid, because that's. But what I'm definitely hearing, and I couldn't agree with you more, is that this business case process and calculating that total cost of ownership is very much an iterative process.
Yeah.
So you start with the vehicles and which ones you believe are suitable for electrification today or in the future. Then you try and understand where they might charge. Then you can put your costs together. Then you may want to go back and fine tune it.
Yeah.
And also, I think, I would argue that actually any vehicle could be an electric vehicle today, apart from perhaps 4x4s and things like that. But that's if you're committed to really charging regularly and using the public network and all of those great things, which is more complicated, I think.
Yeah.
Okay, so you said it, Darren. This is about the people and hearts and minds, right?
It is.
So it is important that when you get that driver in the vehicle, they're confident and they're accepting of that technology. As an employer, what would you recommend they do to ensure driver acceptance and positivity?
It's the old adage of communicate, and over communicate, and keep doing it. So in former businesses where we were electrifying our fleet, big fleet, huge, one of the biggest fleets in the country, we did all sorts of things, from road shows in the office giving opportunity for the skeptics to raise concerns, have a conversation, to have their say, and to get their feedback, because it's really important, and valid, very valid. But then to give them the keys of a vehicle. So we had it's a Nissan Leaf that we used to just give people a chance to drive around in, and guaranteed after a week of driving this, they were sold.
Yeah.
Driving experience. They were sold. They were in terms of we really like this, but always it would be, now how do we charge? So they've gone like, I'm never changing to, but how do we charge? So that's quite a leap. But all you need to do is give oxygen to conversation, and then give them the keys to a vehicle, and then the brain is switched to, I want to do this, but how do I charge? And that's when you've got them. And so as long as there's the infrastructure there to bring comfort to that objection, then there is no issue. Then there are what else? We found that there were HR and tax type concerns, particularly if the fleet were charging at home. So some of the things that came up were benefit in kind, objections. I'm in a rented property and I can't charge my fleet van at home, or I just don't like this ugly white thing that's going to be stuck on the side of my house. What does it look like? So giving people chance to touch and feel products, to engage with the manufacturers, just to see those in action is a good thing. We also launched a salary sacrifice scheme for those that were kind of already they were already sold. And again, that sort of just gives some momentum to an organization that colleagues are already doing this. And so it gives opportunity for people to ask questions, and it becomes normal.
Yeah.
And that's all sort of geared for people who are charging at home, but and then in the workplace, just start. Just get the charges in. Do the things that we just spoke about, but just start small. Start small with 5 units and get people charging the vehicles.
Yeah.
And it soon becomes second nature. The other sort of heart and mind topic that is important is the reimbursement of expenses, and it's a really valid objection or question that people have. Is, if I charge at home, how do you know what is business and what is personal, and what's the process for claiming that mileage back? Mina Energy, great shout, worth integrating or talking to them, and even our own charging point has a consumption report that's designed for fleets, so you could use one or both of those systems. So I think taking the hearts and minds is really important, and there are some really valid questions that people have, but they can't. You just got to give it a go.
Well, and all the everything indicate. Everyone I speak to says, once you get a driver into the vehicle, it's very unlikely they're going to give you the keys back. More often than not, they love it. And the same on salary sacrifice. So the return rate for drivers who have decided, actually, this isn't for me, is incredibly low. So it does speak volumes. And I think you're right as well about, of course, the driver is important. The driver is at the heart of this. But you do also have to win the hearts and minds of all those other stakeholders.
Yeah.
Your facilities team, your HR team, your finance, and so on. So there's a lot of work to do. You touched on the reimbursement, home charging, really important. But what about the workplace charging? So what are the considerations if you're putting a charge point into the workplace?
Yeah, so bay hogging is probably the first thing that springs to mind. You've done all the hard work in terms of fleet diagnostics. You've worked out whether you need AC or DC chargers and how many, and you've overcome the hurdles of installing those and planning permission if that's needed, and DNO applications and grid capacity. So you've done all of the technical work. You put the charger in, day one, somebody in a plug-in hybrid comes along.
Oh, okay. All right. I thought you were going to say an ICE, but okay.
It could be one of those horrible things. Yep. But somebody with a plug-in hybrid comes along and hogs the bay for 8 hours,
right?
And doesn't need, needs half an hour's charge, and you can't find that person, or you can't alert that person to move so that somebody else can charge them.
Okay. But Darren, hold on a minute. Okay. So let's not get the knife into the back of just plug-in hybrid drivers, because you've got a lot of EV drivers who charging at work. They arrive at the office and they've still got 85% state of charge. And so you're right, though. It is hogging a bay when you're able to make your onward journey. At the detriment of someone who can't, I suppose.
Yeah. So I think for workplace and indeed fleet charging, a good consideration to tackle these types of issues would be what platform what system do you integrate those chargers with, whether that's a system Monter or Fuse or those types of platforms. Now, these types of platforms give the ability to set overstay fees or idle fees, or even alerts to drivers to say that your charge is finished, please move the car. So those are the sorts of things that I would encourage a workplace or a fleet provider to look into. And then, of course, EV champions in the workplace or in the fleet are worth their weight in gold, because they can communicate what good EV etiquette looks like, which is don't stay if you've got 80%, move the car so that somebody else can have a go. Those sorts of things. A bit like golf etiquette, isn't it? There's definitely an etiquette to EV charging, and but nobody knows it until you kind of do it. So having the right system to manage that behavior, plus some EV champions to kind of just bring the culture.
And I think, Darren, this is much more relevant in a workplace environment where you're not dealing with a public charger where anyone can use it, whether it's an employee who has a business needs vehicle or whether it's their own car. You have a kind of closed pool of people, and you can easily identify who's using that charge point, and, as you say, send them an alert or whatever. And ultimately, you probably won't get away with bay hogging for too long before it comes back to bite you in the bum, I think is
also true. But even if you're in a fleet environment, a depot, and you've only got, let's say you've got 15 chargers, and you need to cycle those vans, let's say, between those chargers. You want to know that van is now at 80-90%, and you want to move it, and so investing in the right platform system to alert for those types of alerts is really important. So and it's often not thought about particularly in the business case part. Is like, okay, what system do we link this to? What do we need from that system?
And it's great advice, Darren, to really focus on that back office management system. And you're absolutely right. You may not need to use it in anger in day one, depending on how many electric vehicles you have. But if you have a good back office system, you can layer more vehicles into the infrastructure without necessarily maintaining a one charge point to one vehicle ratio. which is not the most cost effective. So
yeah.
really great.
And you can do, and you know, from a fleet or a workplace environment, you can even sort of, depending on the platform, use the employee RFID card, their badge, as the mechanism to start and stop a charge. And then that provides the fleet and the HR and the energy manager with all sorts of data as to who's using the charging points, how long for, whether they want to take that consumption and turn it into an invoice that the employee pays. You know, there's so much that can be done there. So that's the investment into the platform, whether it's a workplace or a fleet environment.
Yeah, great. So just finally, before we wrap up, Darren, it is something that we ask quite regularly, but what help and support is out there for organisations who are looking to electrify their fleet or take electric company cars?
Not as much as there used to be, sadly. I'd have a look at the EV infrastructure grant on the government website, and there are grants for infrastructure for workplace and fleet charging, which will help with the costs, not entirely, but it will help with some of the costs of the infrastructure. That would be my first port of call. Go to the government website, but any good charge point operator or installer or even manufacturer would be able to point the business in question to where they could get a grant for the charging points. Sadly, I don't think there's much else beyond that. There's a wealth of knowledge support that is floating around, and so there's an EV owners page on Facebook, and there's an EV installers page on Facebook, which is just like loads of information. You'll probably come away with more confusion than you had before going in. But so there's financial support in terms of grants, but there's just hundreds and hundreds of people that will help, and that's what I found with the EV community. You know, on Sunday actually we were helping a customer with a competitor charger that just wasn't working.
Right. Yeah.
And that's, you know, there's people around who will do this sort of thing. So, you know, just talk to people.
Yeah, I agree. And the forums that you talked, the online forums are particularly good. Sometimes I'm absolutely amazed by the knowledge that's out there from, I'm going to say enthusiastic amateurs. Some of them are probably professionals, but I am amazed. Well, Darren, it has been a pleasure talking to you. And I'd like to say thank you to Keba for joining GreenFleet Talks.
Thank you for having us.
Well, you're welcome. That is about all we've got time for. Thank you for joining us. Tune in to GF365 again soon.